first off, everyone has masculine and feminine energy. And if you're non-binary, you still have it. If you're same-sex partners, you still have it. They're just energetics. It's not about genitalia. And it is. So when the old world was run, men were masculine, they were hardcore, and there's shadows to that, like domination, abuse, violence. No one wants that. I'm assuming no one wants that. And if you do want that, you might be a psychopath. So those qualities, while they built the world in some senses, right? Like think about fucking Alexander the Great, Napoleon. These were hardcore dudes that were like massacring cultures, but also creating cultures. So it's like there's dark and light in there. Now, something interesting happened when the Industrial Revolution happened, and then the First World Wars. The last 150 years, a lot has happened really fast. One of the things was women got the right to vote. Women started to equalize with men economically, and men started to become factory workers, and they lost the connection with the land and nature. And they also started to isolate more because they weren't necessarily with small villages and communities. They moved into cities. So this is all tied together because then what happens? 1960s, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Everybody's taking psychedelics. Music explodes. There's this whole counterculture movement. Open sexuality because contraception comes in. I'm painting really broad brushstrokes, but all of this started to create a situation where some of that polarity reversal starts happening. So what does that look like? Well, in the 60s, and this is my dad's generation and these generations, who are now in their 50s, 60s, 70s, men grew their hair out, started to experiment with music, started to experiment with psychedelics, started to experiment with different sexual styles, and maybe not so much about mission and money. Meanwhile, what were women doing? Going to work, suiting up, getting hardcore. I'm an independent woman, opening businesses. And so what happened is this polarity reversal, which is a healthy, at the beginning, correction with the genders, because before it had kind of been locked into like hardcore machismo, man doesn't show emotions, and like submissive housewife, I just do the house, which are traditional gender roles, which when fully expressed actually do work, but in the form in our cultures, Australia, USA, New Zealand, Europe, the whole Western world, doesn't work so great, especially because of the level of like domestic violence, abuse, addiction, alcoholism, all of that stuff. Now we're in the inheritors of that. And, in these communities, I'm sure you've heard it a million times. I know I hear it all the time. Where are all the men? Why are there no masculine men?
Why are there no real men?
Right. Where are this, like in the spiritual community, why are there no masculine men? And then the same thing from brothers, they come to me, they're like, Jesus, like she's stuck in her feminine, It's like I'm dating a man. It's like, what's going on here? And I don't pretend to know the answers. I do know that we are in a pathway where you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Yeah. So a lot of brothers I've worked with, like they're actually struggling to express their masculinity because they're afraid of the backlash that culture has created with Me Too and all this cult of sensitivity.
Yeah, there's like walking on eggshells. It's not easy. No. It's not easy because we want to do the right thing. We don't want to make the wrong moves. Good intentions, but...
And the men that have come before us, unfortunately, I also believe were acting with their best intentions, but they caused a lot of damage. And so there's a post-traumatic thing happening where, and the culture, the mainstream culture and media is not helping this. I mean, self-image is huge for the masculine because, again, that will and drive to be of service, and especially if you're called to leadership, like I know you've been, it's like, again, you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Now, if you're self-defeating and there's that guilt or shame frequency, that's where it's like, all right, oh, you gotta move through and into that, and there's a way, like you said, like there's those technologies of meditation. There's a technology of, sharing it. This is something fascinating. When you share it with other men, and this is where the men's circle and that technology comes in, instantly everybody can relate. Yeah. It's not just you. We all do it. So that's a lot of this stuff becomes poison when you just hold it.
Yeah, because people think that what they're dealing with is completely unique to them.
Right. It never is.
Never.
Right.
Yeah.
So when you share it, you immediately create trust and vulnerability.
Yeah.
And you get the reflection Because this is the other thing. Like, I mean, I know this for myself. Maybe you can relate. I'm the harshest critic of myself. Nothing anyone could say to me is as harsh as I hold my standards, which has a gift in that it drives me to really do diligence.
And also means that you're not affected by what other people tell you.
Right. Even though I still am sometimes.
But
because
the shadow side of that is easy to beat yourself up.
Sure. And what's funny is, like, no matter what you think of yourself, you'll be shocked by what other people think of you.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's really healthy to receive that.
Yeah.
And this is where, like, you know, feedbacking, especially from other men, you know, receiving, because you might think like, oh, fuck, like I'm losing my edge, da, da, da. Meanwhile, you know, someone looks at you and they're like, Jesus, Monty's jacked. Like, can you give me some tips on, like, you know, so like you sometimes I underestimate how other people are perceiving me. And there's actually a time where that's a medicine for you, because you're like, it'll pop you out of that little like, oh shit, like I gotta, like, you know.
And what's cool about that, I think everyone should do that as an exercise. Like, go to people around you that you trust are going to give you honest feedback and ask them, you know, like, what do you think of me? What do you think I'm good at? And like the times that I've done that, the feedback that I've gotten, it's not so much that it's positive or negative, it's more just surprising. It's like, wow, I'd never thought of myself like that. I didn't know that I was good at that, because we can't see the picture when we're living inside the frame, and we've got very tainted ideas about ourselves, right?
Right.
So I think that's a really useful, powerful exercise for people to take on.
Yeah. Especially men, especially if you're like that lone wolf kind of energy. Like, you gotta come back to the connection, because that's where that alchemy happens, and you can actually see yourself. You can't see yourself without the mirror.
Yeah.
And we're meant to do it in a village.
Yeah. Somehow we've got to get back to how our ancestors lived hundreds or thousands of years ago. But how do we do that? Like, when we've got cities of 20 million people and, you know, living in 100-story buildings, how do we go back in some way?
Yeah. You know, Terence McKenna named this the archaic revival. You know, Leary, a lot of that generation that broke ground in the 60s on, you know, they already saw this, and what you're speaking to and what we know now in this community is the same that they understood. Now, are we any closer to realizing it? I think a little bit. This might be what it looks like. And just riffing here. This is what I dream and the vision I have, and I'm sure you share a lot of it.
This is one of my questions. What's your vision for the world?
Beautiful. Perfect. There we go. Well, Socrates said it, and then Buckminster Fuller edited it. You don't create change, and the secret to change is not to tear down the old system and attack it directly. It's to create the new system and allow nature and the momentum of that to outmode it, to make it obsolete.
Make it obsolete.
So and you know, bless the sacred activists protecting the land and the earth and attacking these corporations with law and legality. Those people are in their lane, and it's beautiful. It's not my lane. And I don't think a lot of the movers and shakers, the thought leaders, they would do well, and this is my opinion, to not go after Babylon. You're not going to beat Babylon and these corporations with trillion-dollar media budgets by, you know, attacking them or defaming them. What you can do, and what might be a lot more powerful in the short, mid, long term, is just create the new narratives, create the new structures. Now, can we go back to living like our ancestors? No. Can we create exponential, technologically supported smart villages where we understand the water table and we partner with indigenous wisdom and how we tend the land? Can we use it with satellite Wi-Fi and do permaculture gardens where we're growing all our food and medicine? We can. We have all the tech. That's the craziest part. We've had it, and Bucky pointed this out, you know, shout out to Buckminster Fuller, one of the best thinkers if you want to understand post-World War II reality, because he saw this in 1945. We already had the tech then to feed, clothe, and support every being on the planet. And he did rigorous analyses. This is not some hippy-dippy bullshit talk. Like, you can look at resources, finances, you know, distribution networks, logistics. It's been there for a long time.
And plenty of people have done that since.
Right. And now it's like, it's ridiculous how obvious it is now.
Yeah.
But the consciousness that's wielding that power.
That's the issue. Yeah.